So, Joe, here we are again. There is a sameness to all of this when it comes to Israel and Gaza and the fighting with the several wars that have broken out in the last decade or so. What do you think it would take to kind of break the cycle?
Well, I don't think anything's going to break the cycle, Pete. Good morning. Look, this has been going on for 73 years. Palestinians and Israelis have been trying to determine realize their futures in a place smaller than the size of New Jersey, with no real natural resources, no oil, no water, nothing. They're just trying to create these societies. And 73 years later, you have a society of 9 million people, and 71% are Israelis and are Israeli Jews, and the rest are Palestinians. And Golda Meir used to say, "What's a Palestinian?" It's not a nationality, but it is an Arab which is embraced by the Arab community. I was very worried today when I was watching the UN debate, or the UN Security Council. Saudi Arabia was talking about Israel like it was a mortal enemy. So you can see why Saudi Arabia didn't sign up to the Abraham Accord. Look, the United Nations is composed of 193 nations, and you can't make any of them do anything unless you impose your will. And the idea of the current head of the Security Council on a rotating basis is the Chinese ambassador lecturing the Americans on how to behave. Once upon a time, about 20 years ago, the UN experimented with R2 responsibility to protect. And that is, the United Nations had an obligation to help human beings who couldn't be helped by anybody else. Well, that's fallen by the wayside as a result of a lot of things in the last 20 years. So what we're looking at is a Greek tragedy. And the thing about a Greek tragedy, Pete, is we all know how it's going to go. This is going to be a ceasefire of exhaustion. The Israelis are throwing everything at Hamas. Hamas is rolling the dice on this one. And of course, Hamas is at odds with the Palestinian Authority. I mean, President Biden was reduced to talking to the Palestinian Authority about what's happening in Gaza, which has no control over Gaza at all. So this is a great test, though, of course, for President Biden to see if he can do anything. He's not doing very much now because there's very little he can do, as a matter of fact.
Well, it's Egypt, though. Egypt has got a big part in organising ceasefires. They always do. The country always does. But Israel also, Egypt also has concerns about the Palestinians in Gaza City, the militants, I mean, because it doesn't necessarily have an open border either, does it?
No. The Egyptians are very concerned about what goes on there. Keep in mind that when the Egyptians got back, when they had Sinai originally, they also had Gaza. So it's their old territory. They know it pretty well, and they don't want militants on their border. And of course, the nation in the background here is the Iranians. I mean, without Iranian support, Hamas wouldn't have these weapons and wouldn't have the wherewithal to be taking on the Israelis. I mean, Hamas supports Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Israel, and Houthis in Yemen. I mean, they are the power brokers here in terms of terrorism. But look, I think the biggest uptake for me is that I'm watching the Democratic Party unravel, because this has caused a deep rift between the ascending left in America, or in the Democratic Party, and the moderates like Joe Biden. And they've made it very clear in Congress and even in the United Nations that they see this as racial injustice going on, and that the Israelis are responsible. Bernie Sanders wrote a letter to the New York Times, or an op-ed piece, saying that this is Palestinian Lives Matter, and that this is about racial equality and systemic racism and systemic economic inequality. So they're using all the Floyd George language, and they're putting it on the Israeli. But look, we're looking at a tragedy, and there's very little we can do about it right now until it spends itself. The thing is that how much can people watch? Now, I do want to warn people, if you're watching these terrible scenes in Gaza, and these buildings coming down and all the rest of it, you're watching the last 10 minutes of a 3-hour movie. This has been going on since 1948. They've been engaged in combat 14 times. And neither side takes prisoners. These people play for keeps. And so we're looking at this historical tragedy in our own lifetime, and there's very little we can do about it. And at the end of the day, the nation state those 193 nations that make up the United Nations, they do what they damn well please.
Yeah, that's true. That's why they're often can't really make a mark in this kind of conflict, in this kind of circumstances.